The Olympic Games are meant to celebrate the pinnacle of human athleticism, unity, and the spirit of competition. But behind the glittering medals and record-breaking feats, the history of the Olympics also holds a darker side. Moments of shocking tragedy that have left athletes, spectators, and nations in mourning. In this video, we take a closer look at 5 of the most horrifying tragedies in Olympic history, each one marking the Games with sorrow that lingers far beyond the podium. It was January 29, 1994, a cold, gray afternoon over Garmisch-Partenkirchen. Just 2 weeks before the Winter Olympics, the world's top female skiers lined up on the Kandahar course, a slope notorious for both speed and danger. Among them was 26-year-old Ulrike "Uli" Meyer, an Austrian skiing star with 2 World Championship gold medals, 5 World Cup victories, and a career that had made her a household name in alpine sports. But this day wasn't about chasing glory. Uli's goal was simple: finish the season, retire, and finally have time for her 4-year-old daughter, Melanie. She had survived crashes, grueling travel, and the constant risk of injury. Yet, fate had already scripted a different ending. At 1:58 p.m., wearing bib number 32, Uli pushed off the start gate. She wasn't the favorite. The downhill wasn't her strongest discipline, but she attacked the mountain with the precision and grace that had defined her career. For most of the run, everything seemed under control. Then, just seconds from the finish, disaster struck. Traveling at 105 kilometers per hour, her right ski caught an inside edge in the soft snow. She lost balance instantly, her body twisting violently as she slammed onto the icy slope and skidded into a patch meant to cushion, not kill. The crash was fatal. The force displaced her cervical spine, severed her spinal cord, and tore the arteries in her neck. There was no chance of survival. Within moments, Ulrike Meyer, the mother, the champion, Austria's pride, was gone. Hours later, doctors at the Murnau Accident Clinic confirmed what the world had already feared. She was brain dead. Millions had watched a live broadcast of one of the most horrifying accidents in skiing history. Her death sent shockwaves through the skiing community. Just days before, she had been talking about retiring and devoting herself to her daughter. Only 3 years prior, on January 29, 1991, she had celebrated Super G gold at the World Championships in Saalbach, cradling little Melanie as cameras flashed. That joyful image was replaced forever by the tragic crash that ended her life. Initial reports suggested she had hit a wooden timing post, leading to lawsuits and outrage from her fiancé, Hubert Schweighofer. Later, investigations revealed the snow itself was the true culprit, compacted in a deadly way that made the crash unavoidable. Courts dismissed negligence charges, but the debate left lasting scars. Uli's death forced skiing to face its dangers head-on. Safety nets were reinforced, blue dye lines replaced the old pine brush markers, and helmets were redesigned for better impact absorption. Ulrike Meyer remains the only woman ever to die in a World Cup race. Her name endures not only as a symbol of skiing brilliance, but as a haunting reminder of how thin the line can be between triumph and tragedy. For those who watched, and for her daughter who would grow up without her, her story is a permanent echo of the risks at the heart of a sport where speed and peril coexist. It was July 14, 1912, a sweltering summer day in Stockholm, Sweden, and the world's eyes were on the Olympic marathon. Among the runners was 24-year-old Francisco Lázaro, a Portuguese carpenter and national long-distance star. He was no stranger to grueling races, having already won 3 national marathon championships and proudly representing SL Benfica. That day, he also carried the honor of being Portugal's flag bearer, their first participation in the modern Olympic Games. Lázaro had always been ambitious, driven by a fierce determination that bordered on obsession. Before the race, he reportedly said, "Either I win or I die." Little did anyone know how chillingly literal that statement would become. In a desperate bid for an edge, Lázaro had coated large portions of his body with wax, a practice intended to prevent sunburn, and he believed to help him run faster. He thought blocking his sweat glands might somehow lighten his effort, allow him to endure the brutal summer heat, and give him the advantage over his competitors. But the very thing meant to protect him would turn fatal. As the runners left the starting line and the Stockholm sun beat down, Lazaro pushed his body through the punishing miles with determination that inspired awe. Spectators cheered as he passed the halfway point, but behind the applause, danger was quietly closing in. Around 19 miles into the race, the wax that covered his skin betrayed him. His body could no longer cool itself, and heat began to build to deadly levels. Lazaro faltered for the first time, his steps faltering, his movements slowing. The crowd may have thought it was fatigue, but in reality, he was on the brink of collapse. The relentless sun, combined with the blocked pores and rising core temperature, overwhelmed his body. At the 30-kilometer mark, he fell to the ground. Doctors rushed to him, but there was no time. His body temperature had soared to a staggering 41 degrees Celsius, 105.8 Fahrenheit. All attempts to revive him through the night failed, and in the early hours of the next morning, Francisco Lazaro became the first athlete in modern Olympic history to die during competition. The news sent a wave of shock and sorrow rippling across the Olympic community and the world. Fellow athletes were left horrified, spectators stunned, and a nation plunged into grief. The following weekend, a memorial service at the Olympic Stadium drew 23,000 people, mourning a young man whose drive and courage had pushed him to the very limits of human endurance. Collections were made to support his wife, and a monument was later erected at the marathon's turning point in Sollentuna, forever marking the spot where ambition met tragedy. Back in Portugal, thousands attended his funeral, paying tribute to the runner who had carried their country's pride and lost his life chasing greatness. Francisco Lazaro's story remains a haunting reminder that the pursuit of glory can carry unforeseen costs, and that even in the celebration of human achievement, the line between triumph and tragedy can be perilously thin. His courage, his ambition, and his ultimate sacrifice echo through Olympic history, a chilling testament to the dangers that sometimes lie behind the glory of the Games. It was August 26, 1960, in the sweltering streets of Rome, and the summer sun beat down mercilessly on the cyclists lined up for the Olympic 100-kilometer team time trial. Among them was Knud Enemark Jensen, a 23-year-old Danish cyclist who had already made a name for himself in Nordic competitions, earning podium finishes and helping his team secure silver at the Nordic Championships. Jensen carried not just the hopes of his team, but the weight of a nation. Married into the family of former Olympic champion Henry Hansen, and chasing the glory of Olympic triumph. The day was brutal. Temperatures soared past 40 degrees Celsius, over 104 degrees, and the heat quickly took its toll. Jensen's teammate, Jørgen Jørgensen, had already been forced to drop out due to sunstroke, leaving the rest of the Danish team to push on, knowing that failure to finish would disqualify them entirely. Jensen gritted his teeth, determined to see the race through, even as dizziness began to creep into his vision. His teammates held him upright, splashing water across his face and back, trying to stave off collapse. For a fleeting moment it seemed to help, but the reprieve was short-lived. As the kilometers dragged on, Jensen faltered again. The relentless heat, combined with the physical strain of racing at the limits of endurance, overwhelmed his body. Suddenly, he collapsed to the pavement, fracturing his skull in the fall. Medics rushed to his side, and he was swiftly carried to a military tent near the finish line, where temperatures had climbed even higher, nearing 50 to 122 degrees. Panic swept through the crowd and his teammates as they watched the young cyclist slip into unconsciousness. Despite frantic efforts through the night, Jensen never regained consciousness. By the early afternoon, Knud Enemark Jensen was gone. Shock rippled through the Olympic Village and across the world. Investigations later revealed a disturbing layer to the tragedy. A Danish team trainer admitted to giving Jensen and other cyclists Roniacol, a vasodilator, to boost performance. Rumors of amphetamines in his system surfaced, though these were later contested, and the official autopsy cited heat stroke and the skull fracture from his fall as the cause of death. Still, the chilling possibility that a stimulant contributed to his collapse cast a long shadow over the sport. Jensen's death became a catalyst for change. It forced the International Olympic Committee to confront the growing dangers of performance-enhancing substances, leading to the establishment of drug testing for the 1968 Winter Olympics in Grenoble and the Summer Games in Mexico City. Though the medals that day were won on the roads of Rome, the cost of ambition had been far higher. Knud Enemark. Jensen's name endures as a haunting reminder that in the pursuit of Olympic glory, the line between courage and catastrophe can be razor thin. It was July 1983, and the bright lights of the Edmonton Universiade shone on the Olympic diving platform, where 21-year-old Sergei Chalibashvili, a rising star from Soviet Georgia, prepared for one of the most difficult dives in international competition. A prodigy in the sport, Sergei had already earned silver at the European Youth Championship and dominated Soviet diving cups. His ambition burned fiercely. He wanted to prove himself on the world stage, to push boundaries where few had dared. That day, he was attempting a reverse 3-1-2 somersault in the tuck position, a dive newly approved for international use, one that promised glory but carried a razor's edge of danger. As Sergei launched himself from the 10-meter platform, the crowd watched, breathless, unaware of the peril unfolding in a split second. On the second loop of the dive, tragedy struck. He hit the back of his head on the hardwood platform. The pool erupted with screams. Greg Louganis, one of the competitors, later recounted how he instinctively closed his eyes and plugged his ears, sensing immediately that something unspeakably terrible had happened. He ran to the edge of the pool, confronted by a scene he would never forget. Blood staining the water, Sergei motionless. Spectators and athletes froze, helpless as medics rushed to the young diver. He was carried to University Hospital, his body unresponsive. A week-long coma beginning under the relentless hum of life support machines. Hours and days passed with frantic attempts to revive him, but Sergei never regained consciousness. Early on the morning of July 16th, his heart finally failed. The cause of death was clear: acute cranial cerebral injury from the impact. In that instant, the world lost not only a promising athlete, but a young man whose dreams had been cruelly interrupted by the very sport he loved. Questions and whispers followed. Some said his coaches had tried to dissuade him from attempting the dive, but Sergei was determined, pushing his body to its limits. His mother, who had guided him through the sport, was absent from Edmonton, grieving in Tbilisi, unable to witness the fatal moment. Those who saw the accident spoke of it in hushed, haunted tones, and even Olympic champions would later recall the horror of watching a life cut short in mid-air. Sergei Chalibashvili remains the only water sports athlete known to have died as a direct result of a mishap during training or competition at an international multi-sport event. His story is a chilling reminder of the razor-thin line between courage and catastrophe, of ambition racing headlong into danger, and of how quickly dreams can be extinguished in the pursuit of greatness. In the world of elite sport, for some, the cost of pushing limits is tragically forever too high. It was September 17, 2016, along the winding, sun-baked roads of Pontal in Rio de Janeiro, and the men's C45 Paralympic road cycling race was underway. Among the riders was 48-year-old Bahman Golbarnejad, Iran's sole cyclist at the Games, a veteran athlete whose life had been defined by courage and perseverance. A former powerlifter with 12 international gold medals and a silver on the international stage, Bahman's story was one of resilience and determination. During the Iran-Iraq War, he had lost his left leg to a landmine, an injury that would have ended the dreams of many. But Bahman refused to let adversity define him. 3 years after the devastating accident, he began a professional sporting career, first as a wrestler, then as a weightlifter, dominating competitions across Asia and the Middle East. When a shoulder injury forced him to stop weightlifting, he turned to cycling in 2006, once again reinventing himself and chasing the thrill of competition. By 2012, he had qualified for the London Paralympics, and in 2016 he returned to Rio with the same unyielding spirit, representing Iran as its only cyclist, carrying not just his personal dreams, but the pride of his nation. The Rio Paralympic course was treacherous. Riders faced sharp descents, unforgiving turns and mountainous stretches that tested every ounce of skill, concentration, and courage. As Bachmann descended a particularly steep section near Pontal, his focus unwavering, disaster struck. He lost control of his bike, crashing violently into a rock. Witnesses reported the impact as brutal, with the sound echoing across the course. Medics rushed to the scene, working frantically to stabilize him on the asphalt before transporting him to a nearby hospital. But the damage had been catastrophic. Despite their best efforts, Bachmann suffered a cardiac arrest en route and passed away, becoming the first athlete in Paralympic history to die during competition. The news hit like a thunderclap, leaving his fellow athletes in shock and casting a somber shadow over the Rio Games. The loss resonated far beyond the cycling world. Flags across the Paralympic village were lowered to half-staff, and moments of silence were observed at multiple events. Iranian athletes, including the men's sitting volleyball team who went on to win gold, dedicated their triumph to Bachmann's memory, carrying his spirit with them onto the podium. Leaders and officials across the globe mourned the tragedy. Sir Philip Craven, president of the International Paralympic Committee, described the news as truly heartbreaking, while Carlos Nuzman, president of the Rio Organizing Committee, said, "Our hearts and prayers are with Bachmann's family, his teammates, and all the people of Iran." Even Iranian President Hassan Rouhani expressed profound grief, acknowledging the loss of a man who had given his life to sport and national pride. Tributes poured in from social media, fellow athletes, and fans around the world, all honoring the life of a man who had defied impossible odds and shown extraordinary courage. Bachmann's journey to the Paralympics was remarkable. After losing his leg in the war at the age of 20, he relocated to Shiraz, endured grueling rehabilitation, and redefined what it meant to be a disabled athlete. He overcame the grief of losing his first wife to cancer in 2012, raising their son while continuing to pursue excellence in sport. His transition from powerlifting to cycling at nearly 40 years old is a testament to his relentless drive, discipline, and refusal to surrender to limitations. Every pedal stroke he took in Rio was fueled not just by ambition, but by decades of surviving unimaginable challenges and refusing to be defeated by life's cruel twists. Bachmann Golbarnazad's story is a sobering testament to the thin line between triumph and tragedy. He was a man who had stared death in the face before and refused to back down. Yet, even the bravest hearts can be caught unprepared by the unforgiving nature of sport. His death reminds the world that courage and determination often come at a price, and even in the Paralympics, where athletes' perseverance shines brightest, the pursuit of greatness can sometimes end in heartbreak. Bachmann's legacy lives on in the hearts of his family, his nation, and the global Paralympic community, a symbol of resilience, bravery, and the unyielding human spirit.